What if awakening isn't light but fire? Everyone says they want to be more conscious, but few understand what that truly means. Real consciousness doesn't make you comfortable. It doesn't make you happy. It strips away the illusions that kept you sane. And once you've seen what lies behind them, you can't unsee it. Carl Jung warned that expanding consciousness is dangerous because it exposes the mind to truths it isn't ready to bear. The moment you begin to see clearly, you also begin to see the rot, the manipulation, the collective hypocrisy, the machinery of human denial. You start to realize that most of what people call reality is only a shared dream, and the more awake you become, the more alone you feel inside it. The danger isn't in the knowledge itself, it's in what it takes from you. Innocence dies first, certainty follows. You start questioning everything, your desires, your beliefs, your relationships. You begin to sense that even your thoughts are not truly yours, but echoes of a world programmed to keep you asleep. And once that veil begins to tear, you face a terrifying truth. Consciousness doesn't save you from darkness, it introduces you to it. This is the weight of awakening. It's not the radiant clarity of enlightenment, but the heavy realization that most people aren't ready for truth. They don't want to see. They want comfort, belonging, distraction. And when you stop pretending, you become foreign to them. You start walking between worlds, visible but unseen. So before you wish to wake up, ask yourself this: can you handle what your mind will show you once the lights come on? Because once awareness expands, there's no way back into ignorance. You'll see beauty and horror side by side, and you'll have to learn to carry both. If this idea unsettles you, good. It means the mirror is already calling. So take a deep breath, hit subscribe, leave a like, and tell me in the comments, do you believe everyone is ready for truth? Or only a few? No one tells you that awakening feels like breaking. They call it expansion, but before it expands, it shatters. Because consciousness doesn't enter your life as light. It enters as disruption. It tears through everything false, the beliefs you inherited, the emotions you buried, the comfort of ignorance, and in that first moment of clarity, you don't feel enlightened. You feel exposed, fragile, undone. Carl Jung understood this paradox well. Enlightenment begins with disintegration. The psyche, long asleep inside familiar patterns, begins to fracture under the pressure of awareness. You start noticing the lies you told yourself to survive, that you were fine, that life was normal, that happiness could be found in repetition. The illusion collapses, and what remains is silence and pain. Because you're finally seeing what you've avoided all along, yourself. The wound of awakening is not physical, it's existential. It's the ache of realizing how asleep you were, how much of your life was driven by fear, by conformity, by the need to belong. You start mourning the version of you that believed in simple answers. There's grief in awareness, a deep, private grief for all the years you spent hiding from the truth. And yet, this wound is sacred. It's the initiation every seeker must endure. Pain is the proof that the surface has been pierced. The old self bleeds so that the real one can breathe. The mind tries to close the wound, to retreat back into comfort. But once the light has entered, healing can only happen through honesty. You learn to sit with the ache, to stop resisting, to let the truth rearrange you. This is the threshold, where awakening stops being an idea and becomes a transformation. So if you find yourself hurting, disoriented, raw, don't run. You are not breaking down, you are breaking open. There's a moment, somewhere after the first crack of awakening, when the world begins to look wrong. Not dramatically at first, just slightly out of place. The conversations sound scripted, the ambitions of others seem hollow, even your own daily routines begin to feel mechanical, as if you're watching yourself from a distance, performing a role you no longer believe in. That's the moment you begin to sense it. Reality has seams, the dream is showing its edges. Carl Jung described this disorientation as a natural stage of expanding consciousness. When the illusions that structure our world begin to dissolve, the psyche experiences what he called enantiodromia, the turning of opposites. What was once familiar becomes alien. The collective dream loses coherence. And suddenly, what most people call normal starts to feel like a kind of sleepwalking. You look around and see people chasing symbols, status, pleasure, validation, mistaking them for meaning. You try to participate, but something inside resists. You feel like a ghost drifting through a carnival of noise, unable to unsee the machinery behind the laughter. It's not arrogance, it's awareness. Once you perceive how much of modern life is built on distraction, you can't pretend it's real anymore. This stage is dangerous, not because you're losing touch with reality, but because you're beginning to see it. Yet the more awake you become, the lonelier it feels. You speak a language few understand. You ache for truth in a world addicted to illusion. And though you might appear calm, inside there's a quiet panic. If everything is false, what's left to hold on to? Here lies the true test of awakening, not to fall into cynicism or despair, but to stay open, to let the falseness burn without turning your heart to ash. The world may look fake, but your perception of its emptiness is proof that something real is awakening within you. There's a silent cost to awareness, exile. Once you start seeing through illusion, you begin to drift away from the crowd that still believes in it. You try to return, to speak their language again, but something in you no longer fits. Conversations that once felt alive now echo with emptiness. You watch people chase validation, argue about trivial things, and pretend not to notice the deep void underneath it all. You see, and because you see, you no longer belong. Carl Jung wrote that the price of individuation, the process of becoming whole, is isolation. The awakened mind inevitably separates from the collective trance, not out of arrogance, but necessity. You can't unsee truth just to feel accepted. You can't squeeze back into a smaller version of yourself, so you walk alone, not by choice but by resonance. Awareness becomes a kind of distance between you and the world. It's a strange loneliness. You long for connection, yet the old connections dissolve. You feel invisible, misunderstood, even dangerous to those still asleep, because your presence mirrors back the truth they don't want to face. People sense it, that quiet depth in your eyes, and they turn away, protecting their comfort from your clarity. And you, in turn, start to hide your insight, speaking less, observing more, wondering if you've gone too far. But here's the paradox. This exile is sacred. The solitude that follows awakening is not a punishment, but a purification. It strips away everything shallow until only what is real remains. It teaches you to find belonging not in others, but in consciousness itself, in the stillness that sees through all illusions and yet loves the world anyway. So, if you feel isolated in your awareness, don't mistake it for failure. You're not broken, you're simply ahead of the conversation. Tell me in the comments, have you ever felt that kind of exile, where your clarity made you a stranger among the familiar? You might find that others, walking in the dark, have been searching for your voice. The deeper you go into awakening, the more everything you once believed begins to tremble. What you called truth starts to dissolve. What you called self begins to fade. It's not that the world changes. It's that you no longer see it through the same eyes. The familiar becomes unstable. You reach for meaning, but it slips away, as if reality itself were unthreading beneath your feet. Carl Jung described this collapse as a necessary stage in the evolution of consciousness. the death of the old world view that once protected the ego. When awareness expands, the structures of the mind that once felt like solid ground reveal themselves to be scaffolding, temporary, fragile, incomplete. The self you spent years constructing begins to disintegrate, and the terrifying question emerges: if I am not this, then who am I? At first, the collapse feels like chaos. Logic breaks, emotions surge, the mind panics, searching for something, anything to hold on to. You might feel lost, uncertain, even insane. You question your sanity, your purpose, your place in the universe. The ego interprets this as failure, but it's not. It's the soul dismantling the prison it mistook for home. Every shattered belief is an invitation to see without filters. Every uncertainty is a doorway to depth. As your certainties crumble, humility is born. You realize that knowledge was never safety, and control was never freedom. You start to see how the need for certainty was only another disguise for fear. The fear of not knowing, the fear of surrender. Yet in the very heart of that not knowing lies truth. The universe doesn't demand understanding. It demands trust. This collapse is not the end. It's the cleansing fire before rebirth. You're not losing yourself. You're losing what was never truly you. Let it fall. Let it all fall. Because only when every false foundation is gone can the authentic self begin to rise. Quiet, raw, unshakable. There comes a point in awakening when consciousness reaches too far, and the abyss begins to stare back. You start to perceive realities beneath the surface of things, the patterns behind human behavior, the hidden machinery of society, the archetypal forces moving through the collective. The insight feels electric, intoxicating, until it doesn't, because the deeper you go, the more fragile the mind becomes. Awareness expands, but stability trembles. Carl Jung warned that no tree, it is said, can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell. He understood that true consciousness demands descent into shadow, chaos, and the irrational depths of the psyche. The danger lies not in the descent itself, but in losing balance within it. The mind, unprepared for so much truth, begins to fracture between worlds. One foot in the infinite, one still bound to the human. And between them stretches a silence so vast it feels like madness. You start to sense the pulse of existence everywhere, in pain, in beauty, in decay. But the cost of seeing unity is the death of separation, and the ego doesn't die quietly. It fights, it screams, it clings to what it knows. You may feel disoriented, weightless, as if reality itself were dissolving. It's not psychosis, it's exposure. You're witnessing the raw, unfiltered nature of being, the divine and the terrifying intertwined. The abyss isn't evil, it's depth. It's the point where the intellect must bow to mystery. The more the mind tries to understand it, the more it drowns. Only surrender, the quiet acceptance of not knowing, can carry you across. The danger is real, yes, but so is the transformation waiting beyond it. Those who touch the abyss without grounding risk shattering. Those who face it with humility emerge luminous. The darkness doesn't consume them, it refines them. The abyss, after all, is not there to destroy you. It's there to make sure that what survives is real. When the abyss finally releases you, you find yourself in a strange in-between. No longer who you were, but not yet who you are becoming. The old world has dissolved, and the new one hasn't yet taken form. This is the part of the path no one prepares you for, the journey without a map. It's not dramatic or enlightened. It's quiet, slow, and profoundly disorienting. You begin to live without the narratives that once guided you. The ego, desperate for control, keeps asking, what now? What's next? But consciousness has no map, only direction. You walk by intuition, not by certainty. You start to trust the silence more than your thoughts. Days stretch out like mirrors, reflecting everything you still carry. Your fears, your attachments, your need for meaning. And you realize that awakening isn't about escaping confusion. It's about learning to walk inside it without losing your center. Carl Jung wrote that transformation requires the courage to endure the tension of opposites, to live between chaos and order, between knowing and not knowing. This middle space feels unbearable because it offers no guarantees. You can't rely on the old illusions, but you can't yet live fully in the new truth. So you drift. You listen. You learn the language of uncertainty. You discover that surrender isn't weakness. It's the only form of strength that survives here. In this stage, the spiritual ego often tries to return, pretending it understands, building new identities out of awakening itself. But the real traveler knows there's nothing to claim. The path has no trophies. The truth has no owners. You move forward not because you're certain, but because stillness itself begins to guide your steps. And maybe that's the secret. The realization that not knowing is knowing enough. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever walked through this void between two worlds, when life no longer feels familiar, but the next version of you hasn't yet arrived? Share your experience in the comments. Somewhere, someone else is lost in the same in-between, waiting for your words to remind them they're not alone. After wandering through the silence long enough, something subtle begins to awaken within you. Not as a flash of enlightenment, but as a quiet shift in perception. You start to see differently. The world that once felt fragmented begins to appear whole again, yet not in the same way. This is not the return to the old self. It's the birth of a new vision, one that doesn't divide, label, or judge, but simply sees. You notice patterns where chaos once seemed to reign. You begin to sense meaning in what once felt random. There's a deeper intelligence moving beneath the surface of life, an order that doesn't need to be controlled, only witnessed. What once felt like pain now appears as initiation. What once felt like loss now feels like purification. Consciousness no longer looks outward for answers. It rests inside the mystery, unafraid. Carl Jung described this as the union of opposites, the moment when the conscious mind and the unconscious begin to work together rather than against each other. The inner war quiets. You no longer chase light to escape darkness. You allow them to dance together, to inform one another. The shadow becomes an ally, the pain becomes a teacher, the self becomes a mirror through which life knows itself. You begin to act differently too, not out of control or fear, but from alignment. Compassion replaces judgment, because you finally understand that everyone is trapped in their own level of illusion. You stop trying to fix people. You start loving them where they are. And that love is not sentimental. It's clarity made gentle. This new vision doesn't make you superior. It makes you simpler. You no longer need to explain, to convince, or to be seen. You realize that truth doesn't need to be shouted. It radiates. It moves quietly through your presence, through your eyes, through the calm that others feel but can't explain. And this is how real transformation announces itself, not with noise, but with peace. There's a secret no one tells you about awakening. Not everyone makes it back. Some who wander too far into the light forget how to live among shadows. They dissolve the self so completely that they lose their footing in the human world. They see the illusion so clearly that they no longer know how to participate in it. Their bodies remain, but their eyes look elsewhere, as if part of them stayed on the other side of understanding. Carl Jung warned about this danger. He called it inflation, when the ego, touched by the vastness of the self, begins to identify with it. The person mistakes transcendence for escape, clarity for superiority. They lose the balance between spirit and flesh, between divine awareness and human limitation. And while they believe they've reached freedom, they've actually entered a subtler form of imprisonment, detached, untouchable, half alive. True awakening, Jung insisted, must return to earth. The higher the ascent, the deeper the roots must grow. Consciousness without embodiment becomes abstraction, brilliant but cold. To see everything means nothing if you can't hold another's hand, if you can't feel the pulse of the world beneath your own skin. You were never meant to abandon humanity. You were meant to illuminate it from within. The risk of not returning lies in the seduction of transcendence, the comfort of floating above pain, above people, above imperfection. But awakening that rejects the human becomes another dream, another illusion of control. The truth is humbler and far more demanding. To see God in the ordinary, to touch eternity through compassion, to carry vast awareness in a fragile body. So if your vision has expanded so far that life feels distant, breathe, look around, feel your heartbeat, eat, laugh, cry, touch the ground again. You didn't come here to escape the world. You came here to embody it. The purpose of awakening is not to transcend reality, but to love it more deeply. At the end of every awakening, there comes a return, not to ignorance, but to simplicity. You've walked through shadow and silence, through madness and clarity, and now the world looks both entirely new and hauntingly familiar. The sky is the same, but you see it differently. You move slower. You speak less. You no longer seek to convince, to prove, or to escape. You've become what Jung called an integrated soul, someone who has met both heaven and hell within themselves and learned to walk the middle path between them. You realize that enlightenment was never about transcending the human experience. It was about living it fully, consciously, compassionately. You can stand in the noise of the world and no longer be swallowed by it. You can see illusion without despising it. You can love people without needing them to wake up. You finally understand that consciousness is not a crown. It's a responsibility. The more you see, the more gently you must walk. And yet, something beautiful happens in that humility. Life begins to breathe through you again. You taste food as if for the first time. You notice light spilling across the floor. You laugh, not because everything is fine, but because it's real. You've stopped chasing meaning and started being it. The truth no longer isolates you. It connects you to everything. This is what it means to return, not as the same person, but as presence itself. To live among the asleep without losing your wakefulness. To carry fire inside you and still smile softly at the dark. So if you've walked with me through this entire journey, through illusion, fracture, void, and a vision, I want to thank you. It means you've already begun your own return. And now, I'll ask you one last question. What did awakening teach you about being human? Leave your answer in the comments. I read every one. And if this reflection resonated with you, subscribe, leave a like, and stay for the next video. We'll go even deeper into the invisible forces shaping the self and the soul. Because awakening isn't an ending. It's the moment you finally open your eyes and begin to live.